Your journey has been an interesting one up to here. You've questioned so much more than those around you. You've even questioned yourself as to how you could have grown into these thoughts. Am I crazy? When did I begin to think differently? Why do people in general appear so limited in their thought process? Rest assured, you are not alone. The world is slowly waking up to what you already know inside, yet can't quite verbalize. Welcome to the Spiritual Dope Podcast, the show that answers the questions you never even knew to ask, but needed the answers to. Questions about you, this world, the people in it. Most importantly, how do I proceed now moving forward? We don't claim to have all the answers, but we sure do love living in the question. Time for another hit of Spiritual Dope with your host, Brandon Henley. Let's get right into today's episode.
Hey there, Spiritual Dope. I'm on today with Rich Lewis. He's an author, speaker, and coach who focuses on centering prayer as a means of inner transformation. He teaches centering prayer in both his local and virtual community and offers one-on-one coaching. Rich's newest book is titled Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. He publishes a weekly meditation, book reviews, and interviews on his site, Silence Teaches. He has published articles for a number of organizations, including Contemplative Light, Abbey of the Arts, Contemplative Outreach, Erd World. You'll have to, did I say that right? Erd World?
I don't even know.
In search of a new, I can type it, but I can't say it. In search of a new Eden, the ordinary mystic at Pathos, and the contemplative writer. Rich has been a daily practitioner of centering prayer since June 1st, 2014. Centering prayer has been so life-giving and life-changing that he feels compelled to share his journey with others who wish to learn more. Rich resides with his family in Ambler, PA. And to learn more, check him out at his website, silentteaches.com. Rich, so glad you could be on here today. Thanks for joining.
Great. No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we were chatting a little bit, guys, before we got started here. Rich and I aren't too far apart, and we initially talked a little bit about doing this in person. Just didn't happen this time, but it's really cool to know that, in my mind, that there's somebody cool doing cool things that's local like you are, Rich. So glad that we're able to connect through this, right? It's funny because we connected off of a podcast matching site and we got hooked up locally. Anyways, Rich, I always like to start these off with the whole idea that that we're vessels for source, God, energy, divine, creation, and we speak in a way that is speaking to somebody else, right? That it's of service to somebody. So you and I are here for somebody's greatest good that's going to be tuning into the podcast today. And there's a special message coming through you that can only be delivered through you, through this podcast. What's that message today, Rich?
I would say silent prayer. So many people probably don't think of prayer as wordless meditation, but I would challenge people to try a different way to pray rather than their prayer with words. I would encourage them to try silent prayer and see how that can help them and transform them and heal them.
Well, cool. I mean, let's step into it, right? So what is it that got you into silent prayer? Like, what was your journey to finding this space?
Sure. I guess I had always been attracted to silence. I just didn't know what to do in it. I had read books 2011, 2012, gentleman by the name of Carl McColman. I read a number of his books, and he talked a lot about silence and how healing and transforming it was. I don't remember him sharing a practice in it. I've since learned he actually does practice centering prayer, but I don't remember reading it in his books. But so I would just sit in silence for 1, 2, 3 minutes, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I thought, well, maybe it's going to do something for me. But then in late 2013, I was perusing Amazon looking for a book to read, and I stumbled across a book by Amos Smith called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots. So I began reading the Kindle version, and in the book, he talked about a silent prayer practice he had been doing for about 15 years called centering prayer. So I was immediately intrigued because now I had a practice that I could do in the silence. So that's how I found silent prayer, and then I literally just reached out to him on his website. We began a back and forth email dialogue, and we're actually friends at this point. And I'll say it's his fault that I wrote the book too, but it's a good fault. But so I read about centering prayer in his book, and then I just began reading other centering prayer practitioners' books out there. And really the best way to do it though is to begin practicing. So I began seriously practicing it in June of 2014. So so I really stumbled upon it. I guess internally I knew I needed to do something. I just didn't know what it was. And then it found me in his book on Amazon.
Like you were already searching for something. Do you have an idea? Like, you were already attracted to the silence. You were already practicing this somewhat centering prayer in silence. What was it you think that led to even that space, right? What was it that was making you explore the silence? And what made you? Why do you feel like you were seeking? Do you have an answer? Something that
I think I just wanted a deeper relationship with God. I think I just thought I wasn't doing all I could do, and there was more to what my current um, spirituality looked like, and that it lacked depth, and it needed more depth, and it needed more trust and faith in God. So I was just missing something, but I didn't know what it was.
I like that. What do you feel? So, what was your practice at the time that you kind of fell into this?
At the time, I guess I would, I read the Bible, and I read a lot of books by different. I was kind of exploring, so I was reading a lot of different authors and books on Christianity and on Jesus, and even some of them just maybe more scholarly in terms of who is Jesus and what did he do and did he really exist and what are some of the things that he did. So I was doing a lot of that, and then it was mostly a verbal prayer. And at the time, right now I'm in between churches, but at the time I was going to the United Church of Christ, which is a non-denominational Protestant church. So I was enjoying it, but I guess I just felt that there was something missing, but I didn't know what it was. So I think I was just exploring, like, I'm not completely whole. I'm not completely happy with where I'm at. I'm not unhappy with God, but I figured there had to be more depth to this, and there had to be just something more to what I was doing.
You had a strong framework within the Christian religion. You were just looking at where could you fill this in, and you found it. You found some of the fill in through your inner seeking, right? And then somebody inner seeking, and I think that's really cool. That right, you found what it was that you were looking for in the centering of prayer, and through, I guess it sounds like it went through Christianity mystic roots, right? I'd love to hear some more on that too, just kind of what that looks like. And it sounds like centering prayer was a part of some of the mystic roots. Is that fair to say?
No, I guess it would be, because if you're referring to the book, so Amos Smith's book, Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots. In his book, really two things jumped out at me. One was centering prayer in a practice, and a lot of talk about silence, and that silent prayer went all the way back to Jesus and then came forward, through the desert mothers and fathers, and just through all kinds of people up until the present. And then he also talked, the second thing that jumped out at me in his book was he called it the Jesus paradox, Jesus being God and human at once. And that just intrigued me, how he talked about that it was at once Jesus was God and human, and that he wasn't just human and he wasn't just divine, but he really was both. And then that we too we have divinity in us. We're not God, but the divine image is within us. And we're human. So like Jesus, we are human and divine, but with a little d, as he called it.
For sure. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I don't think, my personal take would be, there's really no capital letters in the divine when it comes into that, right? You either, you kind of recognize that spark or you don't, right? And you feel it. And it sounds to me like you kind of hit on this space through your centering prayer where it just kind of, like you said, you felt, the word that I always use is numinous, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that word, right? You felt like that kind of overcome and touching connection, stronger sense of connection with your spiritual self. And then you're like, I gotta go tell everybody about this. Right, you got to let everybody know because you found a way that resonated with you, and I also like the idea too. Kind of what you seek is seeking you. Like you were looking for an answer, right? You were looking for something, and then you found it, and you've really kind of grabbed hold of it because you've contacted the author, and now you're part of you're part of a community of the centering prayer thing, right? That I know I've never heard of it, but it's probably a big part of your world right now. Can you tell me a little bit about what that community?
Sure. Well, centering prayer. So I'll give you some of the history of it, and that'll give you some of the background. So centering prayer was created in the early 1970s. It was actually three Trappist monks, so three Catholic priests. So actually, Father William Meninger discovered the method in a book called The Cloud of Unknowing. And then, because at the time, Thomas Keating kind of charged him and Basil Pennington with, we need to find something for the Christian community. There's transcendental meditation going on, but there's really not a silent practice for the Christian community. So Father William Meninger kind of stumbled across the method in The Cloud of Unknowing of how you do it. So that was in the early 1970s. And then from that point, the three of them really started sharing it with other clergy and priests. And then they really just began rolling it out to the public. And then in 1984, Thomas Keating and a couple other folks started what's called the Contemplative Outreach organization, which is contemplativeoutreach.org. So that's been around since 1984, and that's really the main centering prayer organization. So if you go to their website, you'll see a ton of resources on centering prayer, and you'll also see well, right now it doesn't matter because everybody, if they're meeting, they're meeting via Zoom. But prior to COVID, you could find a group in your state. So if you lived in New Jersey, you could go to the site and you could probably find a group that might practice near you, and you could go there and to maybe their weekly meetings or whatever frequency you wanted. Or even internationally, you could go in Italy and see if there's a group in Italy or in Spain or Germany. So the main centering prayer organizations started, I guess you could say, another 10-ish years after centering prayer kind of kicked off and began. So that's, I guess, the main community is Contemplative Outreach, and they began forming chapters throughout all the states and throughout different countries in the world, a way for people to connect with each other. But now you can, connect with you could join a Zoom group wherever you want. They're probably practicing centering prayer for a 1 hour. They might have a 1 hour meeting, and they're meeting, and you could probably join them via Zoom. And it doesn't really matter where you live if they have a Zoom link and you want to join them. So that's a little bit about the community. It's a virtual community now, but it's also an in-person community prior to COVID, and probably as things begin opening up, I'm assuming a lot of the groups will start having practice or meetings without Zoom and in person as well when they're more comfortable.
Rich, could you tell us a little bit about what those in-person ones were like prior to COVID?
I actually never went to some of them. Well, no, actually, I take that back. I did. There was a Episcopal group that I found that met near me. So some of them were short, and I think they were as simple as 30 minutes, and they would meet early in the morning before people went to work. The one I went to was on a Sunday, so it was 1 hour, and they had a little bit of more community with it. So they before you had your 20-minute centering prayer sit, there was a reading, and then you talked about the reading together, and then you had your 20-minute sit, and then there was kind of a closing reading, and then just some community and discussion before everybody disbanded. But some groups, I think, will time it, and they might do it around dinner or lunch, so they might actually eat a meal together afterwards. So each group is a little bit different. Some are in and out. It's 30 minutes and they're in and out. Some groups have, I'll call it bookends. They have something they do at the beginning and something they do at the end, and they have maybe a little bit more community around it. So the one I went to, I guess, had a little bit more community around it, and it was a little bit over an hour.
And you said it was Episcopalian, but I mean, is it kind of, it's not, is the practice itself non-denominational, and anybody's welcome into those groups?
Yes. So the neat thing about Contemplative Outreach is, yes, I mean, they believe in a lot of interfaith dialogue, but two, the practice itself isn't confined to really any group. It's anybody can practice centering prayer, and these chapters that are all throughout the states and in different countries, anybody's welcome. Even if a church, even if it's, at a church, it's welcome to anybody that wants to come. You don't necessarily have to be a member of that church to go to the Centering Prayer meeting. It just so happens that church linked themselves up and put themselves on the Contemplative Outreach website to say, we have a chapter and we're going to hold our meetings, at the church.
That is a little more inclusive to be able to church is inclusive, I think, in the most part, and they should be. But when you really open it up to everybody like that, to invite everybody in to have this experience and something that can have such a powerful impact, like the way that it's had on you, having that be open to everybody, I think that's wonderful. Now, so when we, what would our practice look like? Let's say I'm ready to start, Rich, and you start to give me the lowdown. I want to start my own practice. What do I need to start doing?
Sure. So I gave the history. So now we'll just say, well, how do you do this thing called centering prayer? So you sit comfortably with your eyes closed. Then to begin your centering prayer sit, you introduce interiorly what we call a sacred word of 1, 2, or 3 syllables. So you might choose God or ocean or Jesus or some type of short syllable word. And that really signifies you're beginning your prayer and you're opening to the presence and actions of God within. And then during the duration of your sits, you can pick, I guess they generally suggest you work your way up to, so eventually you're doing a 20-minute sit. But in the beginning, maybe you're doing 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever suits you and you can best handle if you're beginning it. But so you use your sacred word to begin your prayer. And then whenever you engage your thoughts, and what I mean by that is whenever you begin thinking about what you're doing before your sit, or you begin thinking about, well, what am I going to do after my sit? And what does my afternoon look like? You realize you're no longer sitting with God, you're sitting with yourself and your thoughts and your planning and plotting. So you reintroduce that sacred word just to bring you back to the present, and you let go of all your plotting and planning. And you basically just do that when needed. So it's not used as a mantra. There are mantra-based practices, but centering prayer just uses it when you need it, when you engage your thoughts. And the other thing I'll say is it doesn't have to be a word. I quickly discovered I was more of a visual person. So I changed to an image, and you can use an interior image to bring yourself back to the present. If you're more of a physical person, you can use your breath. And then lastly, some people don't want to close their eyes, or they're fearful that they might fall asleep. So they stare at a spot 3, 4, 5 feet, perhaps on the floor, just to keep them centered and focused. But essentially, that's how you do the practice. And again, you're not using the sacred word as a tennis racket or baseball bat. You're simply using it to come back to the present moment and let go of your thoughts when you begin engaging them and realize you're not sitting with God anymore, that you're sitting more with yourself and what you are planning.
Definitely when you get started with a practice like this, when you first start off, trying to dedicate any more than 5 minutes to something in this super busy world where, oh my God, I should be doing something else right now, right? I don't have time for this, 5 minutes of meditation. Or the 20 that you kind of end up at, given whatever you get to, you're like, I don't have 20 minutes for that. I got this to do. I got that to do. I got to go running off. So when you introduce this, can definitely be a challenge to get it initiated. So thanks for, kind of saying, hey, look, start small, work your way up. And then as you're talking about, the sacred word or the visual, and essentially what I'm hearing, you're setting an anchor for yourself. Right, something you can kind of come back to, or even like touch base. Be like, oh wait, there, touch base. I'm back into where I need to be. What would you say for you? What have some of the fruits, I guess, of centering prayer been for you?
Sure. So we enter centering prayer simply because we love God and we want to trust God and just trust the process. And then God seems to bless. I would say they're unique for each practitioner. So when I look back over the years and look at how have I changed, there's a lot of different ways I've changed. One, I think I'm just more excited to live life. I had an excitement for life, but I think I just have much more excitement for life. I think I'm more present. And what I mean by that is, like during centering prayer, if you think about it, you're letting go and coming back to the present moment. And then because you continuously practice centering prayer day after day, month after month, year after year, that let go posture kind of comes with you into your everyday life. So I can let go of things that I don't need to focus on and hone in on what I need to. So I'm more present to my work. I think I'm more present to people, and I'm more present to my daily tasks. I'm a much more confident person. I think these outside of the centering prayer sits, I notice kind of nudges to get outside of my comfort zone and try and do new things. And then I seem to have wisdom for tasks that kind of pop into my head throughout the day, or things that maybe previously kind of I didn't know how to do, and I didn't know how I would complete the tasks. So it's great fruits for me. Great fruits for me, and you probably could ask someone else who practices it. Might tell you some of the same things, and they might tell you a whole lot of other things that how their life has changed.
Not for nothing. It's a great list, right? Bountiful, abundant. If I could, toss some words to it. I love the let go posture. I think that's a great takeaway there. When you talk about being more confident, where do you think that's coming from out of this practice?
I would say, and that's one of the biggest things for me, because I don't think I was as nearly. Well, I know I wasn't. I'm a much more confident person. And what I mean by that is I'm doing things that would have scared the heck out of me prior to centering prayer. Doing a podcast like this, the idea of even writing a book that's almost 300 pages, and the daunting task of writing a book, and then not only writing it, trying to get a publisher to publish it. Speaking, I've been doing a ton of just speaking in front of small and large groups right now on Zoom, but that scared the heck out of me. So a whole lot of confidence to speak in front of small and large crowds, a whole lot of confidence just to write a book that I know is going to take me a couple of years. And then after that, know that I need to keep pushing, because now I got to find a publisher. So I guess I'll add persistence. So not only confidence, but persistence that I'm just going to keep going, and this book's going to get published.
You're stepping beyond currently what you thought was like a safe zone. You're expanding yourself. You're kind of the idea of kind of letting go and let God too, like let that light your way. Kind of letting go of some of the how, as it were, and just I think you talked about it at the beginning, having more faith, right? What did you say? Previously you'd lacked the spiritual depth, trust, and faith. And these are things that you have found through your practice. And I think that when you find that for yourself, when you find that you're connected deeply with Source and Spirit and God, that you're no longer just doing it by yourself, if that makes sense, right? Like, hold on a second. I don't have to do this as like Rich. Is that fair to say?
No, it is. It is, because if you think the title of my book is "Sitting with God: A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer," and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm sitting with God and discovering my true self, and trusting God, so that I sit with God, and then I get up and walk with God and take my true self actions. The actions that God and I together are partnering on. So prior to centering prayer, you're right. I was trying to do things as Rich Lewis. After centering prayer, I'm doing things Rich and God together, partnering. So I think of it as
Rich.
I think, yeah, it is.
Right?
I think of it as I sit with God, and then I get up and walk with God. It's not see you later, God, and I'll see you at the next sit. It's no, God comes with me, and we partner throughout the day to get done what needs to get done that day.
No, that's fantastic. And the idea too, when you're talking about getting these wisdoms for tasks that like that kind of just appear, again, letting go and let God. But it also, I mean, would you correlate that a little bit to the Akashic Records, right? Do you feel like that's kind of where that comes from?
Say that again.
Akashic Records. Are you familiar?
I'm not familiar. I was going to ask what that is.
Yeah. So I mean, there's this. I want to say India or Egypt, predates Christianity for sure. But it's the whole idea that pretty much all that can be known exists somewhere already, right? And they call this like the Akashic field, right? So real similar though to kind of what you're doing. Like, I don't even know where this wisdom came from. Just kind of came to me through prayer, through connecting with God, through source, that type of thing. So real similar. I didn't know if you had made that linkage before or not.
I had not, but I mean, that makes perfect sense, because there's really all we need is there, and anything you need to do and accomplish is there and available. It's just a matter of being open to it, being open to it and seeing it.
For sure. And to that point and degree, right? If you're not open to it, then you won't see it, right? So what you've done too is you've allowed yourself to open up to something. You've given yourself a willingness to see what you wouldn't have seen again, just as Rich Lewis, right? You're like, I'm open to anything that's possible. And I think that's hard to do, right? What would let's go back to Rich Lewis 10 years ago. What would he say to the guy that's talking now? To you?
He may be confused or just have a lot of questions, or say, how do you do? He'd be asking, how do you do it? I lack the confidence and I lack the wisdom, and I need some help. I want what you have, but I don't know how to do it. And I want to have more confidence, and I want to have more guts just to go for things that scare me. So I think that Rich Lewis was afraid to come out of his shell, afraid to take chances, afraid to try something new, and was worried what other people would think, if I tried something and I looked like a fool.
That's powerful, Rich. I mean, I think that, right there, you kind of sum up like just how far you've kind of come along in your own life. And I think that, I think that that's super powerful. What, I had a good question there too. We'll come back to it. We'll get back to it. But so, I definitely enjoy it. I enjoy it. And I think that, you gave us, kind of how to get into that space, right? In the beginning there, and how do we begin the contemplative or the silent prayer. And you mentioned this too, sitting with God and your true self. You want to expand on what you mean by true self?
Sure. So your true self, to me, is the person God wants you to be. So during centering prayer, we let go, and which can include many thoughts you tell yourself, that such as, I'm not good enough, I'm too young to try this, someone more experienced should, I'm too old to do this, or I'm just no good, or I'm a phony. You let go of all the thoughts you tell yourself, and you connect to your true self, which really is God, and with God, really, you're unlimited. I mean, if you want to trust God, you can move forward with God and with God's power. God, I think God is very patient with us and kind of waits for us, and maybe sometimes nudges us. I don't think he's not like super aggressive. I think God's very patiently waiting for us, and maybe sometimes saying, "Come on, let's get going," but he's going to wait because he knows you're not quite ready. So your true self is like the person God wants you to be, the person God knows you can be, and I connect to it through centering prayer, because I let go of who I'm not and connect to. Once I let go of who I'm not, then I can begin seeing who I am and what I want to do and the things that God wants me to do.
Question, by the way. So the question was, letting go of how people think about you, right? Because you were afraid of that. And the answer was just there. And what you just said, it was, you connected to the truth of who you are, and you kind of let that stuff go. What does it look like for you to start to let some of that go? I know that, we can say it's really interesting, because it's easier to say once we've gone through it, right? Like, oh, I just let it go. Yeah. I mean, no, I was with God, I was with spirit, and everything was cool. I was like, I just let it go. But I think that that's our hindsight of it now, because of where we are. versus kind of what it looked like before that. Before it looked like, I don't think I should, this is me anyways. It's like, I don't know if that's such a good idea. I don't know if that's such a good, I'm terrified. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. But then when you find like when you're out there speaking in front of these groups, when you're jumping on the podcast, when you're doing all these other things, you find that you don't catch on fire, you don't explode, and there's not that much to fear. And people are actually, in my guess, welcoming you. And you're like, they're hungry for what you're bringing them. Is that what your experience has been like? I mean, let's talk about kind of, again, stepping through your fear and taking that courage and letting go of some of those things, that letting go of the who I am not. What's that look like?
No, I mean, it took, the whole process took courage because, I didn't know. Amos actually he was the one that challenged me to write the book. He thought I had we had a lot of back and forth dialogue. He thought I had something to say differently than his book, and he's the one that challenged me to write a book. But the idea of that, was daunting. That how am I going to write a book? So then I had to kind of, in my mind, and it was funny the way he did it. He said, come back to me in about 2 weeks with what are your thoughts about the Jesus paradox? What are your thoughts about centering prayer? So I came back to him 2 weeks later, and then he said, there's your chapters, go write. But obviously I had never written a book, so I decided just to write one chapter and give it to him and see what he thought. And then to my surprise, he thought it was good. It had an interesting take. And then that kind of gave me the confidence that I think I can do this, but now I got to figure out, well, how am I going to do this? So I decided to write the book. The book mostly got written on Saturday mornings from 6. Believe it or not, I got up and went to the local Starbucks, put on a baseball cap, grabbed my laptop, got a cup of coffee there, and wrote for about 3 to 4 hours on Saturday morning so I could come back home and then really spend the rest of the day with the family who was just getting up. But to come back to the question is, everything I did was scary, and I knew the end result, but I didn't know how to get there. But I kind of had to teach myself and learn what's the next step, because each time you keep taking a step, the path continues to become clear. So I kind of taught myself, well, how am I going to write a book? I'm going to write it on Saturdays. And then after that, then I had to write a book proposal. Amos kind of gave me a template to use, and then I did the same thing. Saturdays, I wrote the book proposal. But then different things like that. And then I had to think about, how am I going to market the book? Well, I don't know. So I'm going to start listening to some of the people that know. I listened to some podcasts and I read some books on how do you market a book. And then I began putting some of that stuff in play before the book started coming out. Then I realized, well, I need to do podcasts and I need to do some guest speaking. So you just kind of take the next step. So each step was scary. In fact, even I finished it about a month ago, but I was doing a Zoom study for anyone could come. And it was just a chapter by chapter each Saturday from 1 to 2. I did a kind of a summary of one of the chapters in the book. And then, but it made it real informal conversation. But the idea of that scared the heck out of me, and I made myself do it. So everything I've done, I guess you could say I was scared to do, but made myself do it. And then looking back, was so glad I did.
Who challenged you, and he didn't do it in a way that said, hey, come back and write this whole book. He, again, did it a little piece at a time. He came up to you and he said, what are your thoughts on these two subjects? And you gave him a couple thoughts, and then he said, all right, now you can expand on that. And then, you had your conversation back and forth, and he found something that for you. And I think the power of having someone in your corner like that, I think is something not to be 100% glossed over. I mean, obviously you've done the work and you put it all in and you've done all these things, but to have just that extra nudge of support and somebody that believes in you, unfortunately outside of your family too, right? Because everybody at your house loves you, Rich. We all know everybody loves you. You're a lovable guy, right? And so the family already loves you, and they already, it's getting that outside person to just give you a little nudge, right? Outside validation. And you can just begin to, I always liken it to, Oh, ionic propulsion, right? Are you familiar with ionic propulsion?
I'm not. So go ahead.
Okay,
And,
I'm
sure.
not like I'm not a super scientist, but the idea is that once you get out of Earth's gravitational pull, and each time you add a little bit of speed on top of what you're doing, it can be the same thrust over and over and over again, but essentially it compounds throughout time, and essentially you're going super fast because there's no friction in space. So it's really similar to that. You got somebody just giving little nudges, and you're not doing anything faster. You're just building upon the speed that you've already got, right? So it's a little bit like that when you've got somebody like Amos in your corner, and then additionally, when you take each one of those steps, you're building up momentum, and you're kind of giving yourself a groundswell, and you're finding yourself in this again space that 10 years ago you would be yearning to get to. So again, I think this is a massive accomplishment for you, and I think that it's an exciting time because my guess is you're finding a hungry audience. You want to talk to me a little bit about how the audience is receiving this, what some of the response has been, and how do you feel like you're helping some people?
Yeah. So a lot of what I'm hearing, what they liked about the book was, you know, one, it was helpful really for new people to center in prayer, but it was also helpful for people that were already practicing it because it helped them go deeper in their practice. But I guess what they most liked about the book was that I wrote, I was honest, and I shared my journey, and I shared how it has healed and transformed me. And so there's a lot of me in there. It wasn't just a book about God and theology and how do you do centering prayer. It was a book about, how centering prayer has healed and transformed me, and what is a true self, and who is my true self. What are fruits of the practice, but what are the fruits I've discovered? So it was a lot of sharing my journey and how it has healed and transformed me. And people really like that and it was written in it wasn't written in an academic style. It was written in a very easy to digest style. So the book had 14 chapters, and the chapters were fairly short. And then within each chapter, I had various headings and the sections could be a page to 2 pages. So it was an easy read, and people enjoyed that. And then at the end of each chapter, I had questions for reflection and answer, which I got a lot of feedback on, that it helped them before they moved on to the next chapter to just kind of evaluate what they just read and answer some of these questions for themselves. So they just said it was an easy read for the everyday person, but it was neat because I shared my journey and was honest and vulnerable.
What I like too about what you're doing there, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing your journey, and you're asking people to stop from going to the next chapter, right? Taking action, doing something that is tangible at the end there, doing a little bit of reflection on what they've just read. So it kind of adds a stickiness to it when you do something like that, Rich. I think that's a really great, a good idea. What about your family? What would you say, what would they say has changed the most about you, or what's the impact on your family life been because of this?
I would say, I think I'm just more present and more willing, more really there when I'm there, instead of being there but maybe mentally not there. So I think it's helped me be more present when we're enjoying each other's company and letting go of work and other things, so that I'm giving them 100% of me, or as much of 100% of me during that time. And the neat thing too is my wife, she doesn't practice centering prayer, and that's okay. It's not for everybody. But the neat thing was two of my kids were curious, because I used to practice my second sit in the evening, and they would see me going to the basement and they wanted to know what I was doing. So both of them asked me, so I invited them both to come down, but they both wanted their own time. So I had to bring them down individually, but they wanted to know what I was doing. So I showed them, and then we actually would do it together. So my son was 8 at the time. We would do a 1-minute sit together, and that was pretty neat. We would light a candle, and then read a verse from the Contemplative Outreach app, which is, you use it to set the timer for 1 minute, that just said, "Open my heart to your love." We'd read that together. Then we would do the 1-minute sit up together, and then blow out the candle, and then just kind of talk and have some fun. And then my daughter wanted to do it too, but she was afraid she'd fall asleep. So she centered with her eyes open. And I know I mentioned that earlier. Some people don't want to close their eyes. So she kept her eyes open. I got her up to about 10 minutes. She didn't know it because I would say, how long do you want to go? And she'd say 6 or 7 minutes. And I would just set the timer for 10 because she didn't know what I was setting it for. And then she didn't realize she was actually sitting for 10 minutes. So they did it with me. And that was kind of a neat thing that they did it with me and they wanted to learn more. So I said, well, come down and I'll show you what I'm doing. And we would practice it from time to time and still do.
Into something you can all do together so that you're actually getting to spend some family time. That's quality, right? There's not a TV involved. There's not, a podcast or a phone. I mean, I'm sure using the app, but whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's some time where you can just sit there together and you're giving them, I would have to say, an advantage, right, over someone who's never had that experience to be able to sit down there, think, focus a little bit, and just kind of be in that silence. So especially as we move faster and faster and faster and faster throughout these days. What so let's who do you think would be reaching out to? Who do you think should be reaching out to Rich Lewis, checking out the book? Who's your ideal client, as they say? Your avatar, if you've been doing your marketing, right, Rich? What's that look like?
Actually, ironically, I would say, because I do coaching and I look back, now that I look back at the coaching and the types of clients I have, they fall into 3 categories. So the first type is just someone that's brand new to centering prayer and is not a self-starter. So they need some help with it and they just feel they need some help with it. And if they don't get some help, they're never going to do it. So there's that type of person. So brand new to centering prayer and needs some help with how do I do it? When do I do it? And just sharing that experience with someone to get them moving. Then the second type of category is people that are already practicing, but they want to add a second sit. They want to add more depth to their practice and relationship with God. And they want to further explore what is this idea of my true self and who is it and am I acting from it? And then the third type are actually like priests, clergy, pastors. They come to me and say, I'm taking care of everybody except myself. I need some help with my self-care. So I need you to help me start taking care of myself and to hold me more accountable because I'm taking care of everybody except myself. So I've coached some people like that, and some of them have been priests, and some of them have been pastors of churches and Episcopal priests, where they're doing, I guess, a wonderful job with their congregations, but they're doing not so wonderful job taking care of themselves. So I would say all 3, just because I've been approached by all 3 type of people. So the book can help all 3, someone new, someone who wants to go deeper, but it can also help someone that already is immersed in God and as a pastor, but just not taking good care of themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Everybody needs that. Even the caregivers need care.
Right.
At the top of their game. So, Rich, I mean, I think that's great. And it's good that you know who your audience is, who you're working with. And again, I always kind of look at this as kind of a spiritual speed dating podcast, right? People are coming through, they're looking for who do they resonate with, right? Who do they resonate with? Who can they find that's going to be able to, just like you did, pick up your book, read it, and they're going to be like, wow, Rich, you nailed it spot on for me. This is it, and you could be somebody's Amos. Right. So somebody like that. But I also look at it, and I have a bank of questions here that I always like to ask. Let's see. What is spiritual speed dating? Bachelor number 1 in spirituality here. We talked a little bit. What is our greatest distraction, Rich?
I guess our greatest distraction is probably us and believing the thoughts we tell ourselves that aren't true. And throughout the day, I have to take a step back and say, why am I feeding myself these thoughts? This isn't who I am and what I can do and what I can accomplish, or it's not even something that's probably even going to happen. There's a lot of worry and anxiety. So I would say the biggest distraction is the thoughts we feed ourselves or become anxious and worried about that really don't have any reason to happen. They're probably not going to happen, but we've convinced ourselves that we need to be worried, we need to be fearful, or we've convinced ourselves that we're just not confident enough and not the right person for a particular task. So our thoughts, our thoughts and what we feed ourselves is our biggest distractor.
Right. Amen. And centering prayer is something that can help you with this, right? It's something that's helped you throughout time. So Rich, I want to say thanks for your answer. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing this practice I certainly wasn't familiar with. I didn't know that TM had a competitor, right? I thought that was an interesting information, right? I mean, Christians are like, hey, what do we got for this, right?
Right.
And I think that's pretty cool. The idea that believing those thoughts are not true, right? And how challenging it is to separate the thoughts that we're telling ourselves from the truth. Right. I think that's really powerful observation there, Rich. Where can we send people to connect with you, find out more about the book, maybe find out about some coaching if they're looking for it?
Sure. I mean, the best place is just my website, silenceteaches.com. If they subscribe, they'll get I have a free short ebook on centering prayer if they want to learn more about it. And then if they want to further explore it, they can obviously check out the book, which is also on the website. And then for those that if you fall into one of those three categories in need of coaching and it's something that you feel you could have, it can help you, they can feel free to reach out to me. And then as well, many church groups, they have adult faith groups or prayer groups or some churches that have centering prayer groups can connect with me and I'll speak with them via Zoom these days. I've been doing a lot of that. And I actually have one on Saturday that I'm doing to a Catholic church in California. So my website, silenceteaches.com.
Awesome, Rich. Thanks again for being on today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Spiritual Dope Podcast. Stay connected with us directly through spiritualdope.co. You can also join the discussion on Facebook, Spiritual Dope, and Instagram at spiritual_dope. If you would like to speak with us, send us an email through brandon@spiritualdope.co. And as always, thank you for cultivating your mindset and creating a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking part of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay fully up to date. Until next time, be kind to yourself and trust your intuition.